they kind of just came out of nowhere. They're by Rwanda, but it's an East African country. It's an East African country, and
Welcome back to Young Smart Money with me, your host, Apple Crider. Today we are sitting down with someone who I'm really excited for this episode, guys, because Nick Furnia is the guest today. He's 20 years old and he has a coffee shop that he started, which right there, I mean, that's not a sentence you hear every day, okay? 20-year-old started a coffee shop. It's more of a cafe as well. It's technically called Nomad Coffee and Crepes. And this is their sticker right here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I was actually in New York hanging out with a friend of mine. His name's Ryan Scribner. Some of you guys might know who he is, but he's a good friend of mine. Was hanging out at his place, and there's this coffee shop and crepe place right down the road from him. And so we went there, and while we were there, we were having our food, we were having some drinks, and he told me, he's like, man, you should look into the owner of this place because he's 20 years old. He started this place when he was like 18, 19, and it was a really, really cool place. So I started like looking into him while we were there. There were like some articles in the shop itself that I was reading about this guy. And then Ryan had shot him a text while this was happening. He's like, hey, the guy's actually going to come by in about 5 minutes. So I got to meet this dude in person, which I really enjoy meeting guests in person before or while having them on the podcast, just because there's a whole different dynamic that exists between your virtual interviews where you're sitting down with Skype or Zoom or whatever, and really sitting down with someone in person, shaking their hand, and really getting to know them, see them, and just feel who they are. So I got to sit down with Nick for only about 10 minutes while I was actually in town. So this interview is still going to be virtually recorded, but I was able to really connect with him, hear his story, and I'm just super stoked to allow him to come on here and share his story, his experience, because again, man, it's not very often that you hear about a teenager opening up a physical like brick and mortar business. He's got 2 more businesses on the way. This dude is extremely passionate about what he does, about coffee, and he's got some really valuable insights to share. I mean, this episode, I learned a whole lot about coffee because personally, I haven't drank coffee in about a year, but Nick really like peeled back the curtain, showed me what was up, and taught me a lot about what goes into the specialty coffee business, the different like waves of coffee, and all of this different stuff that I had no idea. He talks about how he started this business, how he hired people, because I mean, guys, you don't think about this, but like being a 19-year-old and hiring people, that's a whole project in and of itself. So he's going to talk about that, how he's built this amazing culture at Nomad, the projects that he's got coming in the future. I mean, this dude is a very interesting guy to talk to. So I'm just stoked to welcome Nick Furnia to Young Smart Money. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It's Nick's first podcast, so he absolutely crushed it. So without further ado, enjoy this episode of Young Smart Money with Nick Furnia. All right, Nick, welcome to Young Smart Money. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself, dude?
I am doing fantastic. It's a great day so far. Now, Nick, our listeners got to hear a bit about you in the intro to this episode, but for those of them that haven't heard of you before, like, who are you? What are you working on right now? Give us a quick snapshot of where you're at.
So my name is Nicholas Furnia. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York where I started selling RTD products, so ready-to-consume beverages before I graduated. And I originally wanted to be an academic. I wanted to be an artist, and I was looking for a business that would be self-driven, that would also be sustainable at the same time, in which I could express myself and pretty much everything that I wanted to pursue. I wanted to put it into a business that I could use to relate with people in my community specifically.
Sweet. So right off the bat, I'm kind of curious, like where, because it seems like you're kind of pulling in different directions here with like the academic, like you want to be an academic, but then you also want to have this business. So talk to us about like that sort of, I don't know, dichotomy.
It was really hard for me personally to integrate myself into everyday life right out of high school, having a business.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, I've always been a pretty self-driven learner. And before I graduated, I wanted to go to college specifically to teach people English. And I mean, you've been to Nomad once or twice, so you've gone through the menu. A lot of the crepes that we serve, a lot of the items are named after literary characters. Yeah, you got stickers. They're named after literary characters, and that started conversations in the past, but they're few and far between. However, the connections that you make, just with somebody that's shared a similar experience reading a powerful or moving piece of art, that sticks with you, and that it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Straight up. So, I mean, we kind of jumped ahead a bit. So I want to kind of flash back because I kind of took us off track. But you were talking about selling these beverages in high school. Why'd you start doing that? And like, what was the draw to selling these things? What were you selling?
All right, I don't want to throw shade on my employer at the time, but I was not making legal wages. Like, I'm talking $20 a shift. I was a busser in a family-style restaurant, and I was working, well, the hours were probably 3 to at least 9:30 every night, $20 a shift plus tips. And then the tips were only a third of what the waitresses were making. So
oh man,
we were really left to our own devices as high schoolers to find like other ways of saving money for school. And I realized somewhere along the way that I didn't want to go to school, and everything that I wanted to know, I could teach myself, and I would find just as much meaning in that knowledge, if not more, because I pursued it on my own.
Where does that drive come from for you? Because I know a lot of people, like, yeah, sure, there is a lot of information out there, but most people aren't going to go out of their way to find it, and they're just going to sort of like stay in their lane,
Before I got medicated, I had no desire to learn at all. And it wasn't until I was probably 14 or 15 years old that I got put on ADHD medication.
Mm-hmm.
And that proved really helpful because up until that point, I really just wanted to be an illustrator and a graphic artist. And that was all that I would think about during school, like what I was going to be doing when I would go home, when I would get off the bus. And eventually, once I got medicated, I went from being a visual learner or a visual artist to somebody that was more literary, somebody that was fascinated by language and by learning through books. So I think it mostly stemmed from boredom, because when I was bored, I would draw. I mean, you could do that pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
But our existence and meaning comes so much from language. So I think that was what fascinated me the most.
Say more about that
Like,
sort of the importance of language.
I mean, when you have a thought, it's in your tongue, it's in your language, and that thought has meaning. I mean, you can't really have thoughts without language. So it's like, it's very puzzling to think about and go down that wormhole. But yeah, I mean, so much of what I do every day, working in the shop and operating a business, is about staying in the present. So being mindful and being in the present every single day, and being aware of when we're slipping up or things that we could be doing better, has helped me so much. And, like, obviously practice it. There are different kinds of mindfulness practices, but really just like, if you focus on your breathing and just focus on everything that's going on, like in your present moment, the present is infinite. You can think about the past, but it's gone, and you can think about the future, but it hasn't happened yet. The present's infinite. So it's just like finding something to do while you're there is the most important thing to do. You have to execute,
Nick, you're blowing my mind right now, dude.
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place right now. I've really never done a podcast before.
It's all right, dude. You're crushing it. I mean, I've already learned a lot, and I've got a lot of gears turning up here right now. So one thing that I do want you to cover really quick, just so our listeners have context, is like what you do now, because we've sort of hinted at it. You've talked about the shop a couple times, but really break down, like, what is your business right now?
So we opened in 2018, but I have been running Nomad as a brand since 2017, when I was in high school. And we started just doing the RTD drinks. So I remember I started out with 50 bottles. By the end of the second week, just selling them in school, I was through the 50 bottles. So I had people just returning them and they would get a discount, but I was selling coffee in the cafeteria every morning before the morning bell. So before classes started, I would be selling my drinks and nobody ever stopped me. I was selling
Really?
drinks in like amber Boston round bottles and like I didn't have a license or anything.
Yeah.
But I did sell to teachers too. So and it was so crazy too, because we shared this campus. It was for STEM kids, so people that were doing like technology based
Sure.
sciences or whatever. We shared a campus with 3 other schools, and every morning kids would get bussed out to this campus for whatever they were specializing in.
Hmm.
And I had some friends that were going to TechSmart, so I would give them a couple bottles to bring and sell while they were there. And like little did I know I was starting like my own in-house like distribution. So
Yeah.
like you really do learn by doing, because now we're working with distributors now, and I really do want to start the RTD thing again. But the cool thing about having a flagship space is like it brings people in for the product. It brings people into the shop. The fact that we're not bottling or canning anymore and we only have one location and we're doing like nitro brews and all of our drinks are specialty, it gets them to experience a little bit more of what we're about.
100%. So like
Yeah.
now you've got this like physical location. Talk to us about that process and going from just sort of like selling drinks at school to really having like a physical like shop where you're selling beverages, where you're making food. When did that transition happen and like what brought that on?
So before I graduated, I think it was probably May, we were already looking at spaces because originally Nomad was going to be a mobile coffee service. Like we would be doing events, we would be doing weddings, etc. And we would probably just be doing it in like a van, a modified van or something. But
Just because that was like easier and less overhead and stuff?
yeah, it would have been less overhead because we wouldn't be paying rent. However, the permits would just be a little bit
Um,
harder to navigate and it wouldn't be as consistent or steady as owning a space. And as someone that has been living in Boston Spa for 8 years now, since I was 12 years old, I think I took a gamble on this place and it's paying off. Um, we're the seat of Saratoga County, and you were just here, so you
yeah.
kind of experienced what it's like during the summer. And this place is kind of flourishing now, so I'm glad I put my money here.
100%.
But before I graduated in May, we secured the space, and at that point, we knew I wasn't going to college. I'm still not going to school, but after the space was secured, we were just paying rent and working on it for about a year.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I was doing a lot of the work myself because we repurposed a lot of local materials from a barn in Boston Spa. So
Wow.
I spent literally a whole summer planing boards that comprised of the floor, and the floorboards are the sides of the barn. It's just like it's the exterior, and then the metallic accents on our bar are just the roof. It's the sheet metal.
Wow. I didn't even notice any of that while
Yeah.
I was there.
So like we're an antique town, and when we first got this space, like we were trying to figure out like how are we going to fit in to this market and what is already being done around us. Um, so we really try to integrate ourselves with that certain homey je ne sais quoi that makes Boston Spa charming. And I think the rustic look fits, man. There's
Yeah.
so much history. So like our bar is made from the hand-hewn beams and whatever. That's pretty much why it took me a year to make the space. But I was also a barista in Troy simultaneously. So I would be working 10-hour days. I would come home. I'd work on the space, and then it would be repeat. So
Wow.
yeah, it was very, very rigorous. I'd say emotionally, it was probably the most like it was my dark night of the soul. It was like my rock bottom, my lowest low, because like I knew that I wanted something and I knew I was putting the work in, but I wasn't seeing results, because nobody was experiencing the product yet.
Yeah, man. And a year is a long time, especially for someone who's like 18, 19, 20 years old. I mean, like
Exactly.
to be working at something that long. I mean, what kept
Yeah.
you going? Like, did you have like this strong vision, or like what was the driving factor, man?
It was like the money that I put into it, man. Like, cause
Mm.
I can't go to college now, Um, but it's great because when you're backed into a corner, you're forced to execute, and suffering's really, really important. Like it's a very important part of growth. Like, I don't know, I don't want to get into comparisons here, but like when you're growing a plant, sometimes you have to tie down the arms in order to make it stronger. And that's called stress testing. And I feel like in order for you to grow, you need to know like what it is you're able to go through. And financially, I've gone through financial stress already. Like I've done that. I've put the physical work in, the blood, sweat, and tears, and we've been open for like a year and 3 months, a little bit over that now.
Wow.
And it's like we always have something new to worry about every day. But honestly, that's what I'm talking about when I say you have to be in the present. You can't be worrying about what you're doing tomorrow. There's so much to do now. There's no sense in worrying about what it is you didn't do yesterday or what it is you have to do tomorrow. Like I woke up this morning and I said, I'm doing a podcast today. We're going to talk about the business. And I had something to look forward to. I have to go to work tomorrow, but I'm not worrying about, what problems I might be confronted with when we open in the morning. As I'm not working today, so it's always a surprise, but
100%. So like, how do you plan things out ahead of time? Do you just like show up and like do what needs to be done, or what does that process look like for you? Because I'm sure there's a lot of moving pieces going on in a brick and mortar location where you're serving people every day. So how does that look for you?
honestly, it's getting a little bit more lax. I kind of just show up because I have enough people at this point that I trust, and we've curated a staff of 7 or 8 people, and we're all really, really close. This past Tuesday, we did like a little bit of a retreat to a different coffee shop, just seeing if we could pick up some new stuff from this cafe that just opened up in Scotia. Shout out to Storied Coffee. Um, but yeah, like we've grown as a family, and I trust everybody with the tasks that I would normally be doing, because I'm working on a second business. That was my goal for when I hit 20. I wanted to be working on a second coffee related business, and we
Wow.
built a pole barn in the neighboring town on a piece of family farmland, and we're going to be roasting coffee there and educating the public as well as wholesale clients, coffee aficionados, if that's what you prefer to be called. Just anyone who wants to learn about coffee, wants to learn about the sensory or the extraction experience, is welcome. And it's going to be an extraction lab, it's going to be a cupping lab, and we're also going to have a tasting area. So it's going to look a lot like our cafe right now, except it's just way, way bigger. Like in terms of concept and in terms of space, like it's a 40 by 60 barn.
Wow.
And we want to hold events there. We want to be producing food for our cafes on this land, because it is technically farmland. And we do get some tax exemptions for being a farm and for producing a certain amount of crop every year. And we could be just selling it to ourselves at this other business, Nomad.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea.
No, it doesn't. And I think it would really be great for not only the coffee community here, but just for people to appreciate this commodity that they're consuming every day. Coffee is the second largest traded commodity in the world. And
Wow.
yeah, and we just consume it every day like it's nothing, but there are villages whose entire infrastructure is funded by this market, you know? Like
Yeah.
we're getting coffee exclusively from farmers in the Kayanza province of Burundi, and before we started buying coffee from Burundi,
Is that a
and
country? Just so.
yeah, exactly. Um, before Burundi was even highlighted by the Specialty Coffee Association this year, I hadn't heard of them. And
Yeah.
before we started buying coffee from them, nobody else had heard of them because like they kind of just came out of nowhere. They're by Rwanda, but it's an East
I don't know where
African
that is.
country.
All
It's
right.
an East African country, and like the fact that we get their top 5% from these farmers, and Burundi, first of all, was voted the last on the World Happiness Report last year. So like,
Really?
yeah, the fact that we're working exclusively with people there and giving them top dollar for their best crop is,
Yeah.
it's kind of an honor. And the fact that they're not selling coffee to anybody else but us.
Dang.
That's crazy. And we get to represent them. We're the end of the supply chain, which is why it's important to me that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Because like obviously I'm passionate about what I'm doing, but I want to represent the roasters. I want to represent the farmers and everybody in between that brings the product here. I'm the one serving to you and preparing it for you and talking to you about it. But like, I could just as easily be somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and you would not get the full effect.
Yeah.
It's all about representing everybody in the supply chain.
Nick, I gotta ask, man, like, where did this passion for coffee come from? Because, dude, I can tell that you're really fired up about like coffee and where it comes from and how it gets to the end consumer. And clearly, even in high school, I mean, when you were selling these beverages, like, where did that come from?
Well, today I look at my interest a little bit differently. I find myself more interested with earth medicine and with flavor.
Huh.
But initially what interested me about coffee was I was like a huge tea drinker, but
Sure.
I could just never do it. I could never do it straight. I would always just be dumping honey or sugar into it. And, black tea is going to stain your teeth, man. I would just sit down with a book and I would drink probably 4 to 6 cups of tea a day. And I think it was the sugar that would keep me going for it. But the thing about coffee, at least for me, is it's so intrinsically complex just on its own. Like when you're drinking a tea, it could be a blend or it could just be a plain black tea on its own. And, I'm not putting down tea drinkers. I've visited tea plantations, tea farms rather, in Thailand. And I've picked tea myself. I think it's a fine medicine itself, but something about coffee, it's grown as a fruit. So like it retains a lot of its original characteristics in the actual seed, which is the part that you're drinking, the coffee bean. So there are different fermentation processes that go into that. And, being somebody that was never exposed to that originally at 15 or 16 years old, the complexity that was presented to me was just like too good to pass up. Like there's so much experimentation that goes into it. It's not just science, it's an art, and it's like it can be very expressive, just as cooking is expressive.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
coffee really opened up my interest in flavor as a whole, and just the kind of earth medicines that we have out there. Like tea would be one of them. You see a bunch of different fermented drinks like kombucha showing up. I would consider that an earth medicine. Like we've had these ways of healing and regulating our conditions naturally for so many years. And I mentioned that I was medicated for ADD earlier. I'm not medicated anymore. Really, like I think I just had to regulate my conditions internally, like I keep on going back to the present as, a place of importance, but it really is. It's a mindset. If you tell yourself that you can't focus, or you have an issue staying on task, like you're probably not going to be able to stay on task. So it's just like, yeah. And then I eventually started, my doctor started sampling other medications with me, and I eventually got to Adderall. And then at that point I was just like, nah, I definitely don't need this, because I was at a point where, in order for me to sit down and read, which is something that I enjoy above everything else, like it's a very meditative, relaxing experience for me, and it's a huge point of self-growth. If I want to sit down with a book, at least when I was medicated and I hadn't taken Adderall, I just would not be able to do it. So it's a matter of creating that internal headscape for you to just be, man. I sound like a hippie right now, but like, this is how I cope as a 20-year-old, with 2 businesses now. Like, it's pretty exhausting. It's pretty depleting. And you have to find ways to cope with everything that you still have to do. I haven't really gotten any breaks, like, since I graduated high school. And all my friends right now from Ballston Spa High School are here for the summer. So like, they'll pop in and they'll see my roommates, but like, I'm usually like locked in here, like in my bedroom, like doubled over my computer doing something.
Oh man. So like, how do you balance your attention, your energy, resources between like both of these projects that you're working on right now? Because you got a lot going on in both areas.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a team built up at the shop that sort of locks things down for the most part. But I mean, that's got to be like, do you have a process there, or how do you just manage both these things?
Well, I live right up the street, so it's like, if anybody needs anything, they can just holler at me. But right now we're still in the startup phase for the roasting company, and the startup it's always been the hardest part for me. Like, 70% of people will have an idea, but only so many will actually deliberate and see it through to the very, very end.
Yep.
So right now I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row. We're going to be crowdfunding this roastery. I already built I already built the pole barn. So like, I already have money. I already have money invested in this project. We poured concrete there. I have a coffee roaster already. It's really just a matter of building everything to design. And climate controlling the space, because when you're storing coffee, green coffee specifically, you want to make sure that when you're roasting, you don't have ambient temperatures screwing up with your heating curves. So like,
not even gonna pretend to understand what that means.
All right, so like, if it's summertime, your coffee might heat up faster in the roasting machine than it would in the wintertime because of ambient temperatures.
And that's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
All right.
you want to be in control of your ambient temperature, like your temperature of the room.
That makes sense.
It's basically like an air conditioner.
Okay.
But for like a 40 by 60 barn, it's like,
that's got to be pretty substantial.
It's a project. Yeah. And then I just have to, we're going to be building a commercial kitchen in there as well. So
really?
Yeah, that's going to be a third business.
Oh my goodness. You got plenty of stuff coming up.
Yeah, no, it's all in consecutive order. So like, the kitchen's secondary for sure.
Yeah.
We want to be able to do more as far as our baked selection goes. And down the road, I want to do a cafe that's a little bit more food oriented, but still has a large focus on fine specialty coffee and espresso.
100%. So how did you decide, or when did you decide rather, that it was time to expand into this new project from just the shop itself? What made you feel like you were ready for that, and what sort of pushed you over the edge to actually taking action on that?
I think it was passion 100%, because like, you want to get closer to the process and you want to get deeper into the supply chain so that you can cut the middleman out and get as close to origin as possible. Like, basically, what I'm doing when I'm making a coffee for somebody, especially a pour over where I'm just making it for them by hand, is I'm trying to educate them about what they should be tasting, where the coffee is coming from, etc. But I would love to tell them, hey, I roasted this myself because I wanted to bring out notes of cherry, pineapple, nougat, whatever. And I want to be able to tell these people, like, I worked with this farmer, and I want to be transparent. So getting deeper into the supply chain and roasting coffee as well as serving it through our baristas is like, it's a dream of mine. I want to go to Origin. I want to visit these families and these farmers and learn about what they're doing, because specialty coffee is always, it's an ever-changing industry. We would define the movements of coffee similarly to how we would define artistic movements, like the Impressionist movement, the modern movement, postmodern movement. So we have the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. And the third wave is pretty much what we're in right now, like with specialty coffee. Second wave was like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. And that's really important to what we're doing now, the second wave, that is, because Starbucks, their drinks are really expensive and they're all right, they're really sugared down, but they made people okay with paying $5 for a cup of coffee. And then they come to us, a third wave cafe, doing something different, and we're charging them $4.50 for something that's really good. And you don't really have to even put sugar in it. Sugar and cream. I get told all the time after I make a coffee for somebody to order, like, I don't need to put anything in this. And like, all you have to do is really sell the product, because like, barista in Italian means bartender. Nomad, when you walk in, the first thing you see is a bar, and then there's a list of the coffees that we have for you to order. And I'll talk to you about the specific nuances of each one. And just by power of suggestion, you'll probably be able to taste at least one of those things. And that's the cool thing about coffee. It's a very subjective experience. Even if you don't taste what I've suggested to you, it's subjective. You might taste something else. I have a flavor wheel on the wall that I point out to people, so like they can just drink a cup of coffee on their own and like point out, like, oh, I do kind of taste molasses there. I do taste notes of maple. And, that the whole subjective nature about flavor is what really gets me excited, because you don't have to eat a pineapple and say, oh, this tastes like pineapple. Like, it leads to more creativity. You don't have to drink a cup of coffee and say this tastes like coffee. You're experiencing more than one flavor compound running over your tongue,
Yeah.
Like, there's so much that goes into what we serve, and we're really just trying to open people's minds up to that subjective sensory experience, which is why I want to do classes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, you clearly are very knowledgeable and have a lot to teach. So like, I'm curious. I mean, this might be like a blasphemous question, but like, what is the difference between, I mean, obviously like the sugar and everything that like Starbucks is loading their drinks with, but like, what's the difference between like second wave and third wave coffee in terms of like preparing it, in terms of like what makes them different? Obviously, like with you guys, you're putting a lot more emphasis into like where this comes from, getting like the top of the top from these countries, but I'm curious on like what the main differentiators are there.
Well, second wave I would probably classify as a little bit more commercial.
Okay.
So like, you see these chains like Tim Hortons, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, and the like, and they're sourcing coffee from everywhere. And they're usually not within a specialty grade range. And what I mean by that is, we're a member of the Specialty Coffee Association, and basically what specialty coffee is it's a margin between 80 and 100 points on a grade scale of 100. So, meaning we only have a 20-point margin to serve you the best of the best. Whereas like we're not going to buy 70 point coffee, 70 point graded coffees or anything like that. But that would be considered commodity coffee, and that would go towards those big box sort of drive-through coffee places.
Okay.
Because it has to be sold to somebody. Like that's going to be a majority of your market, obviously, because a lot of people just want something quick and easy, which is why you're paying a little bit more for specialty coffee, but you're really getting a lot closer to the source in terms of quality, in terms of sourcing, and in terms of how it's prepared most of the time. Specialty coffee is just really forgiving because it's intrinsically sorted better, and because it just tastes better, it's more forgiving for the person that's also preparing it for you. So if I have a barista that's making a pour over on their first day with coffee that's like 90 points, it's still probably going to be better than what you get, down the street.
Man, that's fascinating. I'm learning a lot about coffee today. Yeah. So I'm excited, man. To be honest with you, I stopped drinking coffee probably close to a year ago now, but after this conversation, I might have to.
Yo, what was that like? Coffee. What was that like once you quit?
The first like week or two was a little bit rough because I mean the reason that I quit was I just kind of realized that I was getting pretty dependent on it. So like there would be days where I wouldn't drink coffee and it would just be harder for me to focus, harder for me to like get work done and just zone because I was so reliant on it. So yeah, after having cut it out, it was tough for a couple weeks, but I mean, now I don't really miss it. And I don't like my energy levels are pretty consistent. So, I mean, I'm pretty happy where I'm at, but I might have to take a little bit here and there.
Where are you based out of? Is it Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Wisconsin. Did you have a favorite coffee spot down there?
Not really. I mean, I would get coffee with friends. I had a French press that I would make most mornings. But no, nothing crazy.
Okay, cool, man. What initially got me interested in coffee altogether was the AeroPress. You said that you were using a French press. It's really, really similar, except it's just for like single cup.
Oh, I do know what you're talking about. You put it like on top of the cup, right?
Yeah. And honestly, I have never tasted a fruitier coffee. Like if that's something that you're looking for, that's how you would make it. It's tea-like. It's very accessible. Like rarely anyone at the shop will have to put cream or sugar into it. Yeah. I remember I was kicking myself one morning when I was a barista in Troy. I made myself one and it tasted like strawberries, but I did not record the process at all. Usually I have this scale that's Bluetooth and it reads all of my data. So water weight that I'm adding over time. And it's able to plot that on a chart. I didn't have any of the data saved, so it was like out the window. I have this delicious coffee that I'll never be able to make again.
Oh, tragic.
Yeah, dude.
So I'm curious now, Nick. I want to dive more into like the business side because I mean we've talked a lot about coffee so far, but I mean you mentioned that you were interested in starting a business from kind of a young age once you realized that like you didn't want to go into academia. So how has like running this shop as a business been for you? Like talk about maybe some of the ups and the downs and just some of the big things that you've learned.
It's been a very cruel teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to adapt very quickly. Honestly, I remember my first day. It was May 12th, 2018, and it was for a while, it was the busiest day we ever had, and it exposed a lot of vulnerabilities that we had right off of the bat. And from that point on, I've just been constantly learning how to be more efficient, how to be more lean as a startup business. I pay a lot more attention to how much money I'm spending both personally and professionally. And I'd say the most important thing to come out of running a business and the most important thing that this business has taught me is how to say no. As somebody that was originally working for other people, very compliant, always a yes man, saying no was very, very uncomfortable for me. So, right, like at this age, at 20 years old, I think having that under my belt is kind of big, but at the same time, I just love saying it now. Like, like I'm sure everybody that's listening has gotten themselves into a situation just by being too nice or saying yes. They've gotten themselves into a situation they don't want to be in. And I really don't have time for that, at least right now. So saying no has been really important. Also, working with friends, that's been a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah.
A lot of the kids that we've brought on are very close with us, but I think everyone that is a part of our team now kind of understands everything that I do at the shop kind of has a purpose, or it has a utility. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. I try to be strict with people just because I don't want to condition them not to be working, or to condition them to think that I'm lenient because I was their friend before I was doing this. Like, we have had some people go that were friends, and we're still friends, but like, we just didn't bring them back on this year. But anyway, hopefully they're not listening. They know who they are. Yeah, like those are a couple things that I've had to go through. I'd say also just coming out of my shell was kind of a big one, because in high school I was very, very introverted. I would spend a lot of my lunches alone, like just reading.
Mm-hmm.
by choice, but like I felt as though turning inward with a book would prove more advantageous to me than, getting into a bunch of discourse at lunch. Like, what could we possibly talk about that would be more important than what Thomas Pynchon has to say, or whatever author I was reading at the time, reading was just really formative for me. So it helped me kind of come into my own, but at the same time, it pulled me away from other people. Like, I would always be traveling with a book, no matter where I was, just because I enjoyed that escape. But when you're at Nomad, you're pretty much a bartender. You have to talk to people. You're forced to open yourself up and see what these people are about. And I learned somewhere along the way that I really, really enjoyed it. And it's made me so much less. I mean, I'm not as cynical as I was when I was 17 at all. Like, I love everybody that comes through the door, and I try to treat them all equally, like we've been friends for years, because I try to remember people's names after their first visit. If they're gonna come in again, like, I try to have their name down. I try to introduce myself, because my thing is I love for people to feel remembered. Like they were a valuable part of what we were doing, So that's a big thing with me, and we've built up a lot of regulars since then, and I feel like we do have kind of like a family or a small community built up. So coming out of your shell is kind of a big one. Like, as far as being a business owner, you kind of have to talk about what you're doing all the time. And you have to do it with beginner's mind. You can't sound like you're exhausted. You sound like you love what you're doing, But like, I try to keep it fresh for people. For a while, I went through this exhaustive phase during our first winter, where I could not keep it together, man. Like, survival instincts kicked in big time, because we're in a small walking village, and this is my first business. What are we going to do? Why aren't people coming through the door? Like, if snow is plowed onto the sidewalks and there's a foot plus outside on our stoop, how are we going to get people in? And that was when I think I had like my biggest scare as a business owner. And then we crawled out of it, and like we kicked ass this summer, but we were a total mess. And that's when we started serving alcohol.
Huh.
And yeah, we're 200% up this year since we
Wow.
started serving. Yeah, and now we've got like a huge tequila bar, we've got a huge whiskey bar, we've got 5 beers on tap, a bunch of wines. I'm not old enough to drink, I'm old enough to serve. So like if we diversify and we open ourselves up to new things, it'll pay off. Like I'm trying to get into CBD now.
Really?
Yeah, I've got a friend in Hoosick who's been selling CBD pre-rolls and like CBD edibles like out of his bakery case.
Really?
And I'm like, why didn't I think of this sooner? Yeah. Yeah,
I've
it's like
actually
a huge market.
I've got a buddy who is working on this startup where he's going to be selling, or he might already be selling CBD K cups for like Keurigs.
That's dope.
Yeah, man.
That's gonna be huge. That's gonna blow up.
Yeah, he's crushing it.
Yeah. Alternative medicine's huge right now.
Yeah.
People kind of want to get away from pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Like, I think everybody's had enough. You know, me included.
Yeah, that industry is something else. But Nick, man, I'm very grateful for you hopping on the podcast, man. It's been a pleasure so far. Now I got some questions that I like to ask all the guests. Are you feeling ready for those?
Yeah.
Let's do it, man. So the first of which, and I'm sure you have a lot of answers to this question, but what's something that genuinely has you excited right now?
I'd say the roasting company and the staff that we've already curated up until then. And I put an emphasis on curate because when it comes to building a team, you really do want to make sure that everybody synergizes and gets along and can really work well and not around one another. And I feel as though we've already kind of built up this family. And it sucks that it's the end of the summer and we've got 2 or 3 kids leaving, but they've got the experience under their belt, you know? So other than this coffee roasting company and the staff that we've already curated, probably just making my own coffee and building relationships with farmers. I really do want to get as involved with this community as far as, you know what, edit this shit out. Hold on, edit this shit out. I'm like sweating balls right now. I had to turn off my air conditioner. And I'm like, I got some serious brain fog. Oh, fuck. Okay. Yo, dude, what does get me excited? I was talking to you about how I don't really think about the future. Shit, I guess just roasting coffee. I also do have a beer coming out.
Really?
Yeah, so we are working with Artisanal Brewworks in Saratoga to work on a coffee stout, and it's actually using some of my cold brew concentrate that we use for the nitro brews at the shop. So that is gonna hopefully come out this fall, and I'm hoping to have Knockabout open, roasting coffee, doing classes by like mid 2020 or early 2021. And don't hold me to that. Like, I set so many opening dates for Nomad, but it took me about a year to get open. At least we have the space constructed now.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to dive a little bit deeper on for just a second is is people, because you've mentioned a couple times like the staff that you've curated and really putting together this powerful team. So do you have any lessons you've learned throughout that process that you think would be valuable to other young entrepreneurs?
Well, you have to constantly be asking yourself, am I working harder than the people that are working with me? Because I think it's pretty easy for people to run out of things to do, and that's fine. But what you're really looking for is someone that's going to be proactive and going to be active and forward thinking and passionate about really what your mission is. And we're trying to serve our community the best product we can, the best coffee we can, and we're trying to build relationships along the way. So really what I'm looking for is someone who's proactive, someone who's social, pleasant, and I guess that's it. But really someone that's going to be an asset to our team and, sort of help us shape what we're going to be as a business, because that's what I want. I want someone who's going to look at the menu and say, this would really make a good special. We should do this. I love it when people try to participate in what we're doing on our menu or what we're doing, as a brand. Because I can only do so much, man. If you're going out of your way to help me, I appreciate it.
100%. Dang.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have any habits that have served you particularly well, either in your lifestyle or your business?
I have 2 days off per week. Today is the day where I'll normally be working for either the other business, or right now I'm doing some copyright stuff for Knockabout, and I'm on call for Nomad just in case they need me, because it's Friday afternoon, evening. And then I have Tuesdays off. Tuesdays are more for pleasure, but meditating has been key. And then setting a day aside just to unplug completely. That kind of goes hand in hand with the whole meditation thing.
Yeah.
Because really, I'd say meditation's taught me about patience. It's taught me about myself, obviously. And it's also taught me some important practices of, really staying calm, especially in the workplace. It's brought me to a point of understanding myself and understanding other people. Because, if I sit in a dark room with my eyes closed, I'm just there with my emotions and that endless internal monologue. And you can really make some breakthroughs that way if you're patient.
100%. Man, that's something I've been trying to get more into myself, or that I have been getting more into myself. And yeah, I can tell you that just reflecting, being present, and just listening to that inner monologue and really just letting it play out and seeing what kind of ideas you can get when you do just disconnect for a while is
I'm trying to think of some influences that have sort of pushed me in that direction, but I'd have to say Terrence McKenna was probably a big one. Shout out to Alan Watts. Shout out to Michael Pollan.
Yeah.
If you haven't read How to Change Your Mind, you got to read it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the next thing I was going to ask you, man, is you mentioned books a lot. So I was going to ask you if there were any books that have been particularly influential for you or really world changing.
I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. I wouldn't say I read a lot of fiction. So, I mean, I don't know if this will affect anybody the same, but I did read a lot of Russian literature, and that's very morally rigorous stuff, especially Dostoevsky. I read Crime and Punishment for the first time when I was 16 years old, and it's definitely a roller coaster ride. It's basically, I don't know if I should really synopsize it, but it's basically the title, Crime and Punishment. So it's somebody who makes a horribly stupid mistake and has to suffer the consequences after running away from them for a really long time and, steeping in his guilt. So that was an important read. Also, Brothers Karamazov, for sure. That was another one of his books. And then Thomas Pynchon, who I mentioned before. He's probably my favorite author ever. He's hilarious. And I don't really know a whole lot about him because he was a recluse. I don't even know if he's alive. But Gravity's Rainbow is my favorite book of all time. If you're interested, you should definitely check it out. It's hilarious, but it's it's encyclopedic. Like I needed a guide to get through all the historical allusions and references in that book.
Wow.
So it's an experience. It's really well researched.
That's the truth, man. All right. Well, I'll have to check those out. I'll be sure to drop some links in the show notes to those as well. Nick, man, I'm super grateful for you being here, hopping on the show, doing your first podcast. It's an honor to have you on here. Another 20-year-old young entrepreneur. Where can our listeners go if they want to find out more about you, about Nomad, about all the stuff you're working on? What are the best places to hit you up at?
I'd probably say our Facebook at Nomad Coffee and Crepes, and then at our Instagram handle at Nomad Coffee Crepes. We do have a website right now. I'm doing some work on it, so I'm not going to drop the link on here right now, but I'll make sure that it's posted on one of those sites.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the show notes if it's ready when the show launches.
All right, cool, man.
Awesome. Well, Nick, again, super grateful for you and your time. Do you have any last parting thoughts, words of wisdom, anything you want to leave the listener with here today?
Yo, stay present.
Stay present. That's all it is. That's all it is. Nick, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me on.
Well, y'all, that is a wrap. That's another episode of Young Smart Money in the books. If you guys enjoyed this episode, I got two quick asks of you really quick. The first of which is if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would mean the absolute world to me. We're closing in on 200 reviews right now. I read each and every one of those, and if you screenshot it, tag me in your Instagram story, I will be sure to repost that as well. The second thing that I want to ask you is if you guys are interested in starting your own podcast, okay, learning how I was able to take Young Smart Money from the ground up, turn it into a top 100 business podcast in a few short months. I put together this free training that I'm giving away to people, basically teaching you the secrets to podcasting, the stuff that other people aren't really talking about. Like you can find videos online of like the best podcasting setup or like the best podcasting gear, but no one's really talking about how to land big guests, how to network with influencers, how to actually monetize your show. So I want to put together free training for that. If you guys are interested, the link will be in the show notes for this episode. Otherwise, you can go to applecrider.com/podcast. That's applecrider.com/podcast and check out that absolutely free training that I put together for y'all to get yourself educated in the world of podcasting, because that's something that I'm really passionate about, so I want to teach others. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for the show. Don't want to waste too much of your time. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day wherever it leads you, and I'm glad you chose to spend this last hour here on Young Smart Money. Real quick, just launched a new project called the Online Course Examiner, basically the Yelp of online courses. It is blowing up lately, onlinecourseexaminer.com. Check it out.